With the Tomb Raider remake coming out later this year, I thought now would be a good time as any to go back and replay the very first game in the series. I was aware of the legacy of Lara Croft, having played the Survivor trilogy, but decided to see what the first game was like. What awaited me was a truly fascinating and fun, but frustrating at times experience. Before that, a short backstory on the development of the game. A story begins in Derby, England, where the offices of core design are located. Before they would make the smash hit that is Tomb Raider, they were mostly known for making games for the Sega 32X. They were successful, but not very well known. That would change, however, when the boss of core design, Jeremy Heath-Smith, was in America and would be shown the PlayStation by Ken Kutaragi. This would prompt him to go back to Core HQ and call everyone in for a meeting, where he announced that what he had seen was the future of gaming, and that is what core design needed to design for 3D games. He then started the brainstorming process for 3D games, during which a young animator by the name of Toby Gard would pitch the idea of a third person action adventure game where the player would explore mysterious tombs underneath pyramids, which everybody loved. As recounted by Jeremy himself, this was a revolutionary idea, as 3D games were mostly seen through the lens of Doom, first person, where you couldn't see the character. Toby's idea would have the character front and center during the entire gameplay. Now that they had the idea, they actually had to make it work as well. This was easier said than done, however. The level design of the game would be decided when Heather Stevens, the level designer, was shown a render of an Egyptian tomb by Toby Gard, filled with lights, shafts, dust, and the work. Other things would not go so smoothly, however, as the team would constantly argue over small design elements of the games. They would also secure the Wimbledon based IDOS Interactive as a publisher, and they would set a Christmas 1996 release date. This would lead the team to work long hours to get the game ready for its release date. During the middle of this, Jeremy would come into the office and say he had worked out a deal with Sega to make Tomb Raider a Sega Saturn exclusive first. This took out 6 weeks from the already tight schedule for the development of the game. However, the team would come through and Tomb Raider would release in October of 1996 for the Sega Saturn and Christmas 1996 for the PlayStation. The PlayStation version would actually benefit from the Sega Saturn version, as the Saturn version had so many bugs, but they were ironed out by the time of the PlayStation's release. Finally, getting into the actual game, we are treated to a beautiful PS1 cutscene of a nuke going off, freeing something mysterious trapped underneath the ground. Abrupt? Yes, but there is no time as we cut to Calcutta, India, where Lara Croft is approached by a man named Larson, who's there on behalf of businesswoman Jacqueline Natla. Natla tells Lara of an ancient artifact located up in the mountains of Peru, and Lara, always one to seek out adventure, agrees. After sitting through a couple of loading screens, we can finally start the tutorial, which takes place in Lara's home, a big mansion, by the way. Inside, Lara speaks to us, the player, telling us about the basics of the game. The grid based traversal that I alluded to earlier is fully shown here. It is actually quite difficult for me to put it into words, as it is something you have to fully experience yourself. But let me try. Everything in the game is divided into grids, and every time Lara moves, she moves a set amount within the grid. Her jumps are also exactly one grid, and she can gain momentum in order to jump further. While jumping, she can also hold out to grab ledges, which she can then shimmy along or haul herself up. The jumping only works if Lara has traveled an entire grid's length. While this is a great system, it does have a learning curve, as your mind is so used to normal platformers where a single press of the jump button makes your character launch up. Whereas here in Tomb Raider, you have to also stop and properly align yourself with the jump, which did cause a lot of deaths in the early game for me. After getting the hang of it, however, it was quite easy. Lara herself moves using tank controls, which means that up on the D-pad moves her forward in whatever direction she's facing, and that the left and the right buttons turn her clockwise and anti-clockwise. This is most notably seen in the early Resident Evil games, which I have played, meaning this was the only thing in the game I did not have to get used to. Unlike the Resident Evil games, however, Lara can strafe using L2 and R2. This is mostly useful for interacting with objects, as Lara will not interact with them unless she's standing in the exact spot in front of them. Also, I have to bring this up as this was a problem throughout the entire playthrough, but the jump button is square. The amount of times I've died because Lara would not jump off the cliff as I was holding the wrong button is laughable. I do not hold this against the game, however, as it was the first of its kind and the controls were not standardized yet. However, it is an important point to bring up if you ever want to play it yourself. After completing the tutorial, we can jump into the actual game. Lara makes her way up to the snowy mountaintops to find the entrance of the tomb Natala showed. Opening the door, wolves emerge and maul Lara's guide. She jumps down, dispatching the wolves, but it is too late for her guide, so she's left all alone to make her way through the tomb. Getting into the actual level, Lara encounters a variety of enemies such as bats, wolves, and bears, so now is as good a time as any to talk about the combat. As was evident from the cutscene, Lara has twin pistols that can be readied and holstered with the press of the triangle button. You can also jump around while shooting to dodge enemy attack, which in the case of the wolves is trying to come close to Lara and pouncing on her. Aside from this, Tomb Raider also has a variety of light puzzles in it. They aren't very difficult, however, I do have to bring up one of my biggest complaints, as a large number of the puzzles are just push the block puzzles, which are not very complex, but they can get very tedious when it's the 30th time during a playthrough where you're slowly pushing a large block across a platform in order to line up a jump. Lara's journey leads her down into the Valley of the Lost, where she finds out dinosaurs have managed to survive. She immediately gets to fixing that by taking care of the velociraptors and the T-Rex she encounters down there. I knew of the T-Rex fight as it is quite iconic. However, I was shocked at how early in the game the fight was. She finally makes it to the tomb housing the artifact, and upon taking it, the tomb starts coming apart, leading to Lara having to run through it and back out the way she came. There, she's ambushed by Larson. He's the first enemy with any kind of range attack, and he can melt your health if you're not careful. In the short time it took me to climb out of the water, he had already drained half my health bar. After defeating him, Lara interrogates him and finds out she only holds one piece of the artifact, that is called the Scion, and that Natla has sent another treasure hunter by the name of Pierre Dupont to retrieve the other piece. She knocks Larson out and then proceeds to break into Natla's headquarters to learn of Pierre's whereabouts. There, she finds a diary from a monk who reveals that the Scion belonged to the three rulers of the ancient continent of Atlantis, and that one of the rulers, Tihocan, is buried under a monastery in Greece called Saint Francis's Folly. Pierre would most likely be there, so Lara follows him. She makes her way to the tomb, facing a new group of enemies that include gorillas, lions, crocodiles, and rats. She also has to make her way throughout the tomb, solving puzzles such as facing 4 trials in 4 rooms to retrieve keys to unlock the way forward. During this entire stretch, Pierre will also show up regularly and shoot at Lara, who she has to fend off. Making her way to the actual tomb of Tihocan, Lara comes face to face with a large centaur-like monster who she has to put down. It comes as a shock because up till this point, aside from the notes from the monk, there was really nothing supernatural we encountered. The centaur we just faced was very much supernatural. Making her way inside the tomb, she finds Pierre already having beat her there, and after one final confrontation, defeats him and retrieves the second piece of the Scion. She's then granted a vision of the 3 rulers of Atlantis, where one of the rulers would use the powers of the Scion to create mutant creatures much like the centaur we just faced, and that this caused the other 2 rulers to band together and take the third piece and throw it into Egypt. They would also trap the third ruler in a contraption similar to the one we saw in the opening cutscene. Making her way to the cave that the vision showed her, Lara enters the next tomb on the list, and this is where the vision of Egyptian tombs that Toby Gard thought of during the conception of the game is most apparent. Overall, I want to highlight just how good the visual design of this game is. All the areas of the game feel distinct to one another, and I could pull up 2 different screenshots of different areas and instantly tell which area is which. It is that well made. The colors are vibrant and they pop out. You can see how much thought went into making all these levels, and with the exception of the final level that is just a pulsating gooey mess, I love all of the designs. Once in Egypt, I want to bring up the biggest complaint I have against Tomb Raider, the mummies. These enemies are fast, they jump around, take up a lot of damage, and deal a lot of damage. In the end, the result is that they end up being some of the most frustrating enemies in the game to go up against. With how much damage they deal up and soak in return, they might as well have been mini-bosses. They drop nearly halfway into the game, when most of what you have been dealing up with are melee-based animals who run up and attack you. So when you're locked in a room with a mummy and it starts jumping around, you're very likely to throw your controller in frustration. I died nearly 5 times to the same mummy who's in a room in the first area of the Egypt level. What makes these fights even worse is not having to fight the mummies themselves, but the camera, as half of the time, I can't even see where I'm shooting at because the camera keeps whipping around in order to keep up with the mummy. Thankfully, you do not have to go up against them a lot, so it is bearable in that aspect at least. But I cannot deny that they left a very sour taste in my mouth whenever I had to go up against them. Other enemies Lara encounters in this area are panthers, crocodiles, and various kinds of mutants like the one Lara saw in her vision. At the end of this tomb, we are ambushed once again by Larson. This time, Lara deals with him in a much more permanent manner. After that, Lara gets the third piece of the ski on and makes her way outside, where she's ambushed by Natla herself, who takes all 3 pieces of the ski on and all of Lara's weapons. She then orders her henchmen to kill Lara. Before they can do that though, Lara escapes them and then later sneaks back onto Natla's yacht to stop her. Passing out from exhaustion, she wakes up and finds that the yacht has brought her to an ancient Atlantean pyramid. Firstly, she has to go through Natla's mines in order to retrieve the weapons that Natla's henchmen took from her. And then she has to make her way to the top of the pyramid, where she finds the Skion in some kind of machinery. There, she's granted her final vision, where plot twist, it turns out that the third ruler of Atlantis that we saw getting banished was Natla herself. She was put into some kind of suspended animation, and the nuke we saw at the beginning of the game freed her. Natla herself then shows up, tell Lara her evil plan of accelerating the evolution of the human race using the mutants that are grown using the Skion's power. Lara tries to put a stop to this by shooting the Skion, but Natla intervenes, pushing herself and Lara off a ledge and seemingly falls to her death. Lara, meanwhile, managed to grab an opposing ledge below and, upon hauling herself up, has to face a giant mutant half-torso creature. Making her way back to the machinery housing the Skion, she finishes destroying it, which then sets the entire pyramid to collapse. Before leaving, she encounters Natla one final time, who has assumed her Atlantean form, and defeating her, Lara escapes the pyramid and takes off with Natla's yacht. The end. The story is quite simple by today's standards, but it does get the job done. Lara is a fun character to follow, but it is quite clear that the gameplay is what the main focus was on by the developers. Lara herself is a pretty great character overall, but the other characters are a bit generic. She gives off this cool 90s action hero femme fatale vibe that is executed really well from the very first minute you lay eyes on her. She has nice banter with Larson in Calcutta and tells Natla off because she does not care about the money but the adventure. I have to give credit to the voice actress of Lara, Shelley Blonde, whose performance is what gives Lara a nice amount of personality and charisma and has aged surprisingly well. To truly put into context, this game came out the same time as Resident Evil, which had voice acting like this in it.
This house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
There are bosses in the game, and I say that with heavy quotation marks around bosses, but none of them are memorable or leave long enough of a lasting impression on you. Most of them are just humans with guns that go down quite easily. Other than that, the final boss of the game is super underwhelming, and technically, you do not even need to fight her, as you can just ignore her and jump out of the pyramid, with the exception of the T-Rex that did present a challenge back in the early game while I was still trying to get used to the controls. I cannot call any of these bosses good. My least favorite ones were Natla's henchmen in the mines. They get no proper introduction, shoot at you dealing quite a bit of damage, and then die. They act more as regular enemies than bosses in a game. The giant half-torso mutant creature looks like a good fight on paper, having an interesting design, but he is once again a mostly shoot until dead kind of enemy. This is one thing I hope the remake improves upon. Speaking of problems I have with the game, let's talk about the weapons. Unlike the enemies, the weapon variety is actually quite lackluster. I did not expect any crazy levels of variety in the guns of the game, being that this is a game from 1996, but of the 4 guns you get, 3 of them are essentially the same thing with slightly different damage and fire rate numbers. There was no discernible difference in actually using them. At least the shotgun feels different. Being based on pellet damage, it has the highest single shot damage in the game, with very low range. The pistols have infinite ammo, while the magnums and Uzi have limited ammo. which is not saying much when you can rack up over 500 bullets for each of the guns. So in essence, once you have the Magnum, there is very little need to go back to the pistol, and same again with the Uzis. The different enemy types are what keeps the combat fresh, not the weapons themselves, and hopefully, with the remake, they can make the guns feel better to use, or at least fulfill different roles and not just have a slightly different fire rate to one another. The entirety of Tomb Raider is also 3D rendered, unlike something say Resident Evil, which uses 2D pre-rendered backgrounds. All that you see in Tomb Raider is being rendered while you're playing. This also results in the low draw distance that actually serves to make the game more atmospheric, because what's in front of you is always shrouded in darkness, and to uncover what secrets they hold, one actually has to move Lara out there to explore. Of course, these environments would just be pretty decorations without something to explore in them. And for those who do want to go and explore, Tomb Raider mostly has healing items and ammo, although I never felt a use for any of them, as the game gave me enough while exploring normally. I do have a complaint about the level structure of the game. Being that this game is divided into levels and stages, some of these stages, they do drag on at times. I do not get why some of these levels could not be 2 or even 3 separate stages. For example, Natla's Mine, I went back to replay it in order to get more footage, and it took me over an hour to complete the stage. This is a very slight nitpick on my part, I do confess, but it does drag down the replayability of the game. While the gameplay and story has not aged as gracefully today, one must remember how it must have felt in 1996 when this game was first released. It was the first of its kind, where most games were 3D platformers. This was an action-adventure game with exploration, which had just not been seen in the 3D landscape before, and still, to this day, remains a landmark title. If you have not given this a try, I would highly recommend playing this game. It is still fun after all these years, and it is super easy to get your hands on this game with the release of Tomb Raider 1 to 3 Remastered collection, which will net you 2 other games as well. I give this a solid 7 out of 10. Go ahead and try out if you haven't already.